So anyway, just remember her. Of course, Noah, remember him. I guess that Zoe's feeling better. I saw that she was out there, so she was sick this weekend. Remember our neighbor, Miss Glenda. Then remember Joe and Mackley, Billy Terrell, the Hurt family, Jennifer Kello, Zoe Taylor, and she is feeling better. So Sheila Collins, Daryl and Marilyn Writings, Ashley and Jason Medlock, and Kathy Barnes. So remember all these folks in your prayers. If you didn't know, Kathy drove herself to the emergency room Monday and stayed overnight in the emergency room on in through most of the next day on Tuesday. And she went because she was kind of experiencing lightheadedness, chest pains, and that kind of thing. Her blood pressure kind of shot up. And so, fortunately, she made it there. She couldn't get a hold of any of her family. So, that could have taken her. So, anyway, she got herself there, and she is in room 3313. So, they are still running tests, but what she told me when I was there this afternoon is they suspect ulcers. So certainly keep her in your prayers if you would. Anyone else we need to put on the prayer list? Anyone?
I have three.
Three?
Four, counting Chris.
Here.
Just write them down.
A lot of people sick. You know, COVID, flu, strep, all kinds of stuff going on. So, 'tis the season. But as we were discussing earlier, January's going quickly. And so, anyway, just continue to keep everyone in your prayers if you would.
They're there. They're here.
We have movie night Saturday at 6 o'clock. We're going to show it in the auditorium, as long as everything works. John got it hooked up today and said everything's working, so hopefully it will. So we're going to start that at 6. Sunday is Sanctity of Life Sunday, so I will be preaching from Psalm 139. So I hope that you will be here for that and to be a part of that wonderful celebration of life.
We have a shower for Friends for Life.
Yes, we do have a table shower for Friends for Life. There's a list on our bulletin board that, there'll be a table before Sunday. If not, we can put it in the floor. Have a floor shower. Anyway, so we're going to do that Sunday morning. Sunday night, we will be doing another message from the autopsy of a deceased church. So I hope that you will come and be a part of that. The following Sunday, the last Sunday of January, man, it's just right around the corner. The Gideons will have the service that morning, as we every year have a Gideon speaker about this time of the year. And then Sunday night we will have our business meeting. So I hope that you will be prepared for that. It is an agenda style meeting, so if you have something to put on the agenda, please do so before Sunday night, because I will have a printed list of what we are going to be discussing in the business meeting. So none of it is for me. It's all maybe committee, different people have put some things on there. So I hope that you will come and first of all pray for it and about it, and then come and prepared to handle the business that we need to handle. So again, a lot going on, and just continue to keep everyone in your prayers as we progress through this year, because it seems like this year is going to be a quick one. Like I said,
They get
the
quicker
rest
all
of
the
the
time.
year is any resemblance of the rest of the year. It's going to be a fast year. So again, just keep everyone in your prayers.
I'm used to things going fast.
Are you? Okay, you talk like it. Also, and I failed to mention this Sunday, and I apologize. A bunch of books back there on the table. I inherited some new books, so I swapped some out. Took some down that I hadn't used in a long time. So there's study books, there's reading books, there's a whole table full of books. So feel free to take whatever you want. I will leave that up for a while, and then if I see that there's not any interest there, I'm gonna try to find somewhere to maybe donate them to. I don't really know where, but hopefully we can find. I hate to just take it to the recycle. A lot of good books in there.
You can either donate to Pause In, or there's a place, that book place where they take them in and you
Is it Books by the
sell
Pound?
by the,
Books by the Pound?
yeah. Where is that
It's Lincoln, like, I know there's an auto glass store over there, and there's,
It's on
it's on
Lincoln,
Lincoln, yeah.
there at the curb.
Oh, yeah.
That was
An industrial,
Building,
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
Kohler, I could not think
Yeah.
of that company.
Kohler.
One of those. So anyway, if you're interested, they're up there. Come by anytime and see what's there. You can pick through them, and I didn't put them necessarily. I do have some study books that are together, but other than that, they're just kind of mix and match. So anyway, anything else? Anything? Men's breakfast. I failed to mention this Sunday as well. There's a men's breakfast at Shiloh Baptist Church on Saturday the 28th. I wrote it down on there. It is written. It starts around 7. The pastor of Shiloh said, if you get here at 7 o'clock, don't expect to eat breakfast right away. But that's what they shoot for, but apparently they don't. They rarely hit it. Apparently what's been going on is Shiloh and West Race have gotten together and they've done these men's breakfasts. One time they'll do it at Shiloh, one time they've done it at West Race. So when I was at the men's supper at Charity, this was announced. So anyway, I'd kind of heard rumors of them doing it, but I didn't have dates then. So if you're interested, let me know. We can get together, or you can go on your own. You know where Shiloh Baptist Church is. So I think it would be good for us men to gather with other men. We had a really good meeting Tuesday night, deer steak and the fixings, and it was really good. And so I think Charity does that once a quarter. So one time, this is I think a couple of years ago, they started doing a deer meat once a year, and then they'll do a fish fry, and they'll do some other things. So they don't really ask for any donations, and if there are donations given, they give it to the speaker that they have that night. So I hope that you will decide to go. As soon as I find out what the date of the next one, I will put it in the bulletin. But the next, as far as men's meeting go, is the 28th. So that's Saturday morning. So anyway, all right. Anything before we get into our study? Our text tonight is 2 Samuel chapters 19 and 20. So as you know, I preach from 2 Samuel 20 verses 1 and 2 Sunday morning. So anyway, let's pray. Father, thank you again for just loving us the way you do, for bringing us through storms and different things of life. Just help us, Lord, to cling to you each and every day. And Lord, just help us to learn more about you through studying your word and the principles that we live in, that we learn from it. May we continually keep them in our hearts that we might not sin against you. Father, it's so important that we study and that we learn from others' mistakes and heartaches and pains and even the good times, so that we might be able to live a life that's more meaningful for you. God, our world needs to see what it means to be a Christian in action, more so than words, but in a visible way. So God, help our lives to be solely committed to you, and may we truly share your love with those who desperately need to know your Son Jesus. Thank you again for these that are here and are faithful to be here. And God, just continue to bless our church, be with all those on the prayer list. You know the many needs that are out there, and we know that each will be answered according to your will and not ours. So God, again, help us to remain faithful. Thank you again for your Son Jesus, who died for us on the cross so that we might be saved. We love you. We praise you. Amen. All right, chapters 19 and 20. Again, we're talking about the tribulations of David. We've already talked about a lot of the triumphs, and in tribulations, he actually had some triumphs, didn't he? So if anyone has a verse or verses that they would like to share, now is the time. I do that so I can drink my coffee.
Well, in verse 16, Shimei or
Shimei.
he sure had a change of heart, didn't he?
Yes, he did. He saw that he was on the losing team.
Yeah.
And really and truthfully, when you think about it, the world, the lost world needs to understand that as well. You know, they may curse God, but they need to come to this eventual knowledge of, you know what? I'm fighting a losing battle because I'm not on the winning team. And so, yeah, Shimei, now if you remember, Shimei was one as David and his followers were leaving Jerusalem, fleeing for their lives because of Absalom. He was one that went alongside throwing rocks and basically cursing them. He blamed David for Saul's death, and he kind of basically, in just summarizing, wished David dead. And so, you know, at that time, Shimei was talking to someone who was fleeing, not someone who had won a battle. So when we look in chapter 19, we see that this man came to his senses. And, you know, he didn't come arrogantly. He came very humbly. And he asked for forgiveness. And he said, I understand I'm guilty. But I hope that you won't hold me guilty. And again, he asked for forgiveness. And, of course, David, now David's men wanted to kill him. But David said, and the king said to Shimei, you shall not die. And the king gave him his oath. And so David, again, demonstrates the godly heart that he had, you know, even in the midst of his sinfulness and all that was going on in his life, he still had a heart that was pleasing to God. Are we going to be quiet tonight? Are we tired? And it's only Wednesday. It's hump day. I'll be excited.
Tomorrow's my Friday, thank you.
Tomorrow is your Friday. Good deal. Good deal. That helps to know that, doesn't it? You know, if you have some comments or script, just buddy in, that's fine. But we'll kind of go through these chapters relatively quick unless there's some discussion. But beginning in chapter 19, of course, you know, the previous chapters where Absalom was killed and those who followed him, they were defeated and David's army and his followers won. Now, this should have been a time of rejoicing, right? I mean, what it looked like, David was going to lose the kingdom. And it looked like him being on the throne was over. But instead, because David was God's man, Absalom lost. And honestly, from what all the description, which we're not given any numbers, it looked like David's army was highly outnumbered. But just the way of battle, it kind of reminded, they fought kind of in the woods. And so there's always hidden things in the woods. It's kind of like I've heard some, and I'm sure it's a lot worse, the Vietnam War, where, the Vietnamese would get in the foliage where you couldn't hardly see them, and you didn't really know they were there. They knew the territory, and therefore, when they attacked, a lot of times it was not known. And so that's kind of the way God defeated Absalom and his men. But instead of David, of course, he's a dad that lost his son. But again, this was a rebellious son, but Absalom was David's son nonetheless. And so David is grieving over his son and grieving on and on and on. And so really what should have been a day of rejoicing for David and his followers was actually treated like a day of mourning. And it basically says that because of that, the people who were following David as they were going back into Jerusalem kind of went in shamefully because, usually when you want a battle, this was a big deal. There was a big procession and there was excitement, but instead they just kind of snuck in under the radar because everything was gloom and doom. And so David brought down those people who should have been, rejoicing. So David had a captain, a commander, a field commander, Joab, which was his cousin, that spoke to him and just told him like it was. And he basically confronted David after that and said, look, you're bringing down everyone that followed you. And really and truthfully, you are making them feel as though they're not worth anything. The way you are acting, and it didn't, I don't think he discounted the fact that David lost his son, but again, sometimes you just have to put some things aside in order to move people forward. And so he basically said, the way people are feeling right now because of the way you're acting, they feel like you would have been happier had we lost and Absalom would have lived. And the way that these people were perceiving is that David didn't count those who followed him as being valuable, and that they had played an important part in the victory. And so after his little speech there, it says David arose and took his seat in the gate. And the people were all told, because, Joab said, hey, if you don't straighten up, these people will not follow you any longer. And so he went, he got over his pity party, which again, grieving parent is something hard to get over. But again, as one writer says, you can over grieve. You can be overly in despair, and it just kind of spreads out over everybody. So, David decided to get over that, and he went out and sat at the gate, and the people were told, and all the people came before the king. And so that was a wonderful thing, right? And so David and his people are on their way to return to Jerusalem. This chapter has a lot of stuff, doesn't it? Because on their way, this guy we talked about, it's Shimei, who had just belittled them left and right when they were fleeing. He comes and confronts David and bows down and apologizes and asks for forgiveness, which the people didn't want to do that. but David did. Again, showing that he had a heart that had forgiveness in it. You see a lot of Mephibosheth. You remember what happened with Mephibosheth when Absalom took over? Ziba, his servant, went to David, and David asked, well, where is Mephibosheth? And what did Ziba say? Well, Mephibosheth's waiting in Jerusalem, hoping that this is the time that a family member of Saul is going to sit on the throne. Now, basically what he's saying is Mephibosheth's turned his back on you. And so, of course, without knowing the other side, David gave all of Mephibosheth's land to Ziba. So, it tells us that Mephibosheth met David. And he explains to him, that wasn't it at all. My servant actually deceived me and deceived you. And so David then understood and, of course, took Mephibosheth back under his wing. I was going to give him some land back, and Mephibosheth said no. So again, David handled this in a civil manner and in a loving manner. And so we see that through everything that David went through, he did have followers that were loyal and that helped him through because, again, he was God's man. The interesting thing to me at the end of 19 is the fact that as David crosses the Jordan and he is escorted. Now, again, remember, David won the battle, but he was not going to force the fact that he would be king. It was only when the tribes, the heads of the tribes came and accepted him as king that he decided to go back to Jerusalem to sit on his throne. So, I mean, David was not a forceful person, even though he was rightfully the king. Because the people decided to take on Absalom as their king, David was not going to force them to take him back. And so, the people were kind of in a turmoil over this. Well, we kind of turned our backs on David. We decided to follow Absalom, but now Absalom is dead. So what are we going to do? And actually, the tribe of Judah, which David was from, was actually the last ones to accept him back as king. Now, it's interesting, isn't it? So, Judah comes to escort David back to Jerusalem, right? But they are confronted by the heads of the 10 northern tribes. And these guys are wondering, hey, why are we left out of this? Now, if I was David, I'd have said, why would I include you? You turned your back on me. But instead, they made a big deal of it, right? And so after the arguing and all that, I guess they finally figured it out, and David headed back to Jerusalem. Now, in chapter 20, any questions on chapter 19? Again, God told David he would have turmoil in his ruling over Israel, right? Because of his sin with Bathsheba. Not only would some of his children lose their lives, but also he would have trouble. And most of his trouble would come from his own people or his own household. And so we've seen that already. But we see when he is going back to Jerusalem to take over the throne of Jerusalem once again, it says, now there happened to be there a worthless man. King James, I think, uses the word rebel, whose name was Sheba, the son of Bichri, a Benjamite. And he blew the trumpet and said, we have no portion in David, and we have no inheritance in the son of Jesse, every man to his tents, O Israel. So here's what Sheba is saying. We're not going to follow this man. We don't acknowledge his authority. We don't acknowledge him as a great man because, he called him the son of Jesse. So he kind of, as I said Sunday, devalued his identity, you know. And then he invited others to join him, you know. Every man to his tent. So boy, he's telling them to turn their backs on. Now, had they not been in this place before? You know, would you not think that people would learn from past history, but very recent history? I mean, it's almost mind-boggling that Sheba is kind of falling into the same path as Absalom did. And Absalom didn't win. I mean, he lost in a big way. So would you not think that this dude would say, maybe I ought not to do this? But I don't really know what caused him to. But again, he got up a rebellion against David. Now again, you have basically 10 tribes or representatives from 10 tribes that follow him. And you know, when they challenge David, then they take off, right? And David assigns the army, his people, to go after him. He said, you know what? Gather the men together, go after him before they get into a city and secure it, and then we can't get to him. And so, you know, David knew exactly what to do. And this guy did exactly what David said he was going to do. He went to the city of Abel of Beth Makkah, or Makkah, however you want to say that. And they went into this city. Now, this city apparently didn't suspect anything, right? And so Joab, you know, it's funny. There were a lot of different leaders during this time. David is assigned Amasa, which was over the armies of Absalom, to lead the army, right? But in transition there, when Amasa went to go gather people together, he took too long. And so Joab and his men went out, and some others. And in meeting Amasa, of course, Joab killed him, and he became the commander. So Joab was not a good guy. Even though he did a lot for David, he was not a good guy. He wasn't nice at all. Yeah, I mean, the way he killed him was pretty gross. I mean, it says that, you know, he acted like he was greeting him, and he stabbed him in the stomach, and it says his entrails fell out, you know. That's biblical, though. And so we see the horror of things that happened there. But Joab led the army to this place. And, you know, they laid siege to the city. Now, do you know what happened when a city was laid, was under siege?
Everybody inside suffered because...
I mean, they locked the gates. No one could go out. No one could come in. If you read on down the line, before the Israelites went to Babylon and some went to the Assyrians, there was a siege that was laid hold on Jerusalem. And it was a terrible time. I mean, people were using animal manure to build a fire. Women would give up their babies, and they actually became cannibals. I mean, you know, this was a horrible scene. And so in this city was a woman who was...
Put an end to it quick.
Yeah, she was a wise woman. And so instead of standing up and saying, you know what, we're not doing anything, we're going to fight you, she goes out and she talks to Joab. And she, in my vernacular, what's the deal? You know, why are you seizing our city? And so Joab, this lady tells Joab, this is the deal. All you have to do is give up this one guy, Sheba, because he is leading a rebellion against David. All you got to do is give up his head, and we'll leave you alone. So this woman said, okay, let me go talk to the people in the city. And it says that she was a wise woman. And so she talks to the people in the city, and next thing you know, the dude's head is being thrown out to the armies of Israel over the wall. And so the battle was over. So we need to understand that, you know, when you read God's word, oftentimes people will look at the Bible and think, well, it's just full of love and mush and all that kind. Man, I'm telling you, if they made movies from, I mean, a lot of them would be rated R because of the content, just gore, you know, and the just how mean people were back then, because they lived in a basically uncivilized culture, you know, and oftentimes when you live in an uncivilized culture, sometimes you have to become uncivilized.
And our cultures are moving back that direction.
Our cultures are moving back that direction. Yes, they are. Because it seems like, well, and you know what, part of the, and I'm not going to blame it on TV or anything, but some of these television series and stuff, it kind of depicts, you know, the atmosphere of the culture, because some of these series are made to where you're actually cheering on, you know, it tempts you to cheer on the bad guys who are committing wrongs and living unlawfully and booing the bad guys. And that describes our culture. You know, what's right is wrong and what's wrong is right. And that's what is being promoted. And therefore you have a culture that, for one thing, is very restless, and for another thing, does not value human life. You know, if I don't like you or you did something that I don't like, I'll just shoot you and take you out. You know, and there's a lot of these series that are the same way, that are depicting these groups that, you know, if I, you know, whether it be the cartel, a motorcycle group, or whatever, if I don't like you, I'll just take you out. If you don't do what I want you to, I'll just take you out.
But it's more than just the U.S.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of influences coming from other places, too.
You know, if you just look at Iran, looking at Israel as the little Satan, the U.S. is the great Satan. And what goes on in those countries, the Taliban taking back over in Afghanistan, the brutality that's there. Even what's going on in Ukraine, and I think it's as much their president as it is Putin. And we're supporting
Yeah.
Ukraine, and I think it's more of a money laundering back to some of our
Billions and
politicians.
billions of dollars.
But
It's selling people's lives
yeah.
almost as sport in any of the situations. And we look back to our country, we're mangling kids with this, changing their sex to killing our babies.
Right.
And how much more brutal can we get?
And it's so offensive to people who have just the slightest amount of knowledge, scriptural knowledge, that they think that we're that stupid to just feed us this big crock of garbage.
But there are people that are.
Lie to our face.
Yeah.
Lie to our face and tell us right is wrong. And,
Right.
You know, it's just.
But you know, it pacifies. You know, that's just kind of like the entertainment atmosphere that we have in our country nowadays. The word in the Greek for entertainment is described as the opiate of the masses, which means it's mind-numbing to a point to where people have no idea what's really going on.
Blood sport of the Colosseum.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, back in the days of Rome, I mean, man, Colosseum was a big deal. You know, those gladiators and slaves that went out there and they just, just slaughtered one another. It was cheered, and if another person didn't kill the person that they defeated, then they got booed. And so, human depravity goes a long, long way and goes way down deep. And we are, I guess when I was growing up, it wasn't near as visible as it is today.
Well, it was something to be ashamed of,
Yeah.
It was more people recognized depravity as depravity. And
Well, people have been convinced there's nothing shameful.
Well,
You know?
It was just a slow, just like,
slow fade.
so many different things,
That few years ago, what was it, early like the McCameys,
Oh,
they did a song called Getting Used to the Dark.
Yeah. Well, and that's it, And a lot of people in churches have bought into that. We don't need to attend church. We don't need to study the Word of God. All we need to do is attend once in a while, and we're good to go. We can just then go out and live life as we want to.
So I'm basically a pretty good person,
Yeah,
But
yeah. That's kind of the.
That way it's not bad.
I'm basically a good
So-and-so's worse
person.
than I am.
Yeah. But I guarantee it, when you stand before the Lord on Judgment Day, He's not going to bring someone who was on Skid Row and say, well, your life was lived better than that life, therefore I'm going to let you in. You're going to have to stand up on your own merits or not,
Jesus is a
or
standard.
lack of, yeah. And God's going to wonder, why should I let you in?
You shouldn't.
Why should I? And of course we know that nothing but the blood of Jesus is going to be the acceptable thing.
a friend of ours said in about the early 90s, I think, Jim Michigan, said that the live for self of the 60s and 70s, the kids we were seeing in the 80s and 90s, and now we're at the grandkids of that. And it's living for self multiplied so much at this point.
Well, think about the Ten Commandments when it talks about the effect of the sins of the father. It affects several generations. And until the nation and generations turn back towards God, we're never going to experience what we did at one time anyway. And God will not bless our nation. When I was younger, our nation was blessed. It for the most part was a successful nation because, God blessed because of maybe that generation and past generations who overall believed and had faith and lived for Him. But as time has gone on, that becomes less and less.
Farther and farther removed.
Yes. And so, further generations will be suffering for the sins of present generations until, either the Lord comes back or there's a turnaround.
I was watching a movie called Interview with God yesterday. And one line that caught me was when the man who was God made the statement, he said, Satan is irrelevant. And the interviewer said, what do you mean? And he said, Satan is only as relevant as you allow him to be.
Absolutely.
And I think over the years, we haven't necessarily made him relevant, we've just ignored what God has said
Mm-hmm.
and just open the door and let him in. you
Yeah.
know?
Yep, give him an inch, he'll take a mile if you allow him a little foothold there.
Cause I know there are things that are acceptable now
Oh yeah,
that my parents, my grandparents especially,
oh yeah,
you know,
yeah,
they'd have knocked you out of the house if you'd have
yeah.
done this or that, you know, I mean, it just wasn't gonna
It
happen.
reminded me of a different phrase. Give him an inch and he'll become a ruler.
Yeah.
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 Yep.
So there is hope, because if we know Jesus, there's always hope, no matter how bad the culture gets. But through the example of David, we see that being a man or a woman of God is never easy. I mean, hard times come, especially when we turn our backs on God and we want to live more like the world than we want to live for Him. So, hopefully this is an encouragement for us to keep the faith, because God is still in control. And again, like Ginger said, Satan is really not relevant. I mean, God has made Satan not relevant, because through His Son Jesus in particular, He demonstrated that He even had power over death. So I mean, that makes Satan very irrelevant. But when people allow Satan that foothold and stronghold in their lives, then it makes a difference. And it affects those around them. So we just need to continue to pray and remain faithful. And I know that God is going to take care of us. Anything else? Anyone? Anyone? I'm thankful we didn't get any tornadoes today. I saw where Waldo had a tornado there.
So I got to come home one night stay, the shortest, and they released him this morning about,
That's wonderful.
I don't know, they were getting ready to release him at 8 o'clock, so it was just paperwork, so it was like,
Amen.
the
That's
shortest.
good. Yeah.
They kicked him out.
They don't have to kick him out.
He's ready to go.
He's
Isn't he?
ready to
He went
go.
over the walls.
Yeah.
He actually came home in a better spirit than he went down there.
Yeah.
Yeah, he
That's
was-
good.
Yeah.
Good.
That's good. I know that just hearing the report that all his blood work checked out to where he could take the treatment probably elevated him quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, especially after having to stay the week.
Yeah.
But, and
Yeah.
I guess he was just afraid, that, because he knows ultimately the goal is to finish all the treatments, no matter how long it takes, so, and they told him when he started, it could take up to a full year. He might as well just expect a full year. And he realized that if the treatments fell in place like they were supposed to, and he didn't get sick, and this didn't happen, and that didn't, that it would be about half of that time.
Right.
So, that's what he's looking forward to, but, he's been really blessed because he's only had that one setback.
Yeah.
That actually put him into the hospital.
Yeah.
So,
We just keep praying
for an
for him.
extended period, I mean,
Right.
he's had to put it off a week or so, but,
All right. Anything else? Well, y'all on there, take care. Glad y'all are with us. God bless.